Okay, you're probably asking, why is this guy in a suit with a stuffed polar bear? First off, he's not just any polar bear. His name is Polly, appropriately enough. And he belongs to my son. I really, really had to bargain with my son to get Polly here tonight. But Polly is going to help me talk about property rights, private property rights. Now, when we think about private property rights, we tend to think about land. We think about barbed wire fences. We think about clear delineation of our property. Even in the deepest, darkest winter in the Swiss Alps, we still know where somebody's property begins and where it ends. Maybe not this winter, but you can see what I mean here. But in reality, property rights is more than land. It's about anything that we can exclude from other people using. It's anything that we can sell, that we can buy, that we can transfer, that we can lend, that we can manage, anything we damn well please. That is a property right. And the funny thing is that we know this. As humans, we know this intuitively. We know, this is mine, that is yours. My son knows, Polly is his. And we keep this with us. I mean, I know that these letters aren't mine. I'm not going to walk off with them after the talk, I promise. And I'm probably not even going to touch them. Ironically enough, though, we tend to forget kind of the power we have with property rights. Just as we get old enough to enjoy them, we start giving them away. We start outsourcing our kind of property rights to other people. Normally, we give them to politicians. You see what happens? We have a crisis, an economic crisis, global financial crisis, for example, or maybe some kind of pandemic. Also, just for a hypothetical example. And we say, do something. We need to do something. Politicians say, yes, we will do something. You just need to give us a little bit of power. So we say, yes, we don't need our property rights right now. Here, take them. Then, the crisis passes. And we don't get our rights back at the end. In fact, they're diminished, right? We find out that we're not allowed to sell this. We're not allowed to be open here. We're not allowed to do this. And also, this belongs to them now. Why is this important? Well, this is important because we as humanity face major disruptions, grand challenges. And I'm going to talk about two specific ones later on. I'm going to talk about climate change, and I'm going to talk about inequality. But the point is that we need to have more private property rights to be able to tackle these grand challenges. We need to stop looking to others. We need to grow up and take back that innate understanding of property rights that we have, that my son has, that we all have from our youngest ages. Now, I'm an economist. I've done lots of work on economic institutions. And economists, we're an ornery lot. We argue with each other on basically everything. But we're almost unanimous in saying that property rights are good against any kind of economic metric. Savings, investment, growth, human development, the environment, all of these things are better when we have better protection of private property rights. And I mean, it makes sense. Think about it. Why would you start a business? Well, first off, if you didn't actually own what you were going to sell. I mean, that's kind of silly. But, okay, that's an extreme example. But why would you start a business if at any point some bully could come in and just take what you have? You wouldn't, right? You put in a lot of time, a lot of effort into starting your business, and like that, it's gone. If even that weren't a problem, why would the bank lend you any money if you don't have any property for collateral, right? You have to put something up then that the bank could then seize if you're not paying. Don't worry, Polly, that's not going to be you. So we know that property rights are good for me and you. In fact, one of the neat things about property rights is that they allow us to get rich. We can start a business, we can be entrepreneurial. They don't promise that we're going to be rich. No, no, no. I would never say that we make that promise. But they allow us that ability. They allow us to take responsibility to solve things in our own lives, our own kind of vision of where we want to be in the future. Now, since property rights are so good, we should take a step back and think about then, where do they come from? Nobel laureate Douglass North spent an entire lifetime thinking about this very question: where do property rights come from? And he came up with a totally typical economist answer. He said, property rights come when the benefits of having property rights outweigh the costs of having property rights. But we already know that property rights are good for me, they're good for you, they're good for my son, they're good for everybody. So who do the benefits have to accrue to, then, in order for us to have broad-based property rights? Well, politicians. They need to accrue to leaders. If you look back in history, we only started to get broad-based property rights being acknowledged by the kings and queens of yore when it became feasible for kings and queens of yore to extract rent, revenue, power from property rights. We had antiquated kind of approaches, serfdom, slavery. But once we had technological change that made the land more valuable than owning the people, then the politicians came around. It's like American humorist Will Rogers said, buy land, they're not making any more of the stuff. So politicians got on board and said, yes, we should have property rights, but not too many. I mean, if you're the king, why would you give kind of all the property rights away? If everyone else is owning something, what do you own? So they try and keep the property rights limited. And they try and have people not necessarily know what their property rights, the extent of their property rights are. So this is a limiting factor. We have another limiting factor for property rights, and it's rich people. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that billionaires shouldn't exist, because I don't think that's right. But rich people don't have an incentive to agitate for property rights. They have what is theirs already. Konstantin Sonin is an economist at the University of Chicago. He wrote a paper looking at his home country of Russia in the 1990s, where politically connected insiders were able to benefit from their political connections. You know them as oligarchs. He said, Sonin said that the oligarchs got what they wanted, agitated for property rights to get what they wanted, and then stopped. They didn't want any more property rights because they got what they wanted. They already had the money to pay for lawyers. They had the money to pay for guys much larger than me to protect their property. And they had the money to buy politicians. So, politicians, rich people, and I'm not just going to lay the blame on others, it's our fault, too. As I mentioned, every time there's a crisis, we tend to vote for the politician that does the most. We tend to give away our property rights. A little bit here, a little bit there. As you know, as you can tell from my accent, I'm American. I'm a New Yorker, special breed of American. In the United States, we have a policy, or rather a doctrine, called eminent domain, which says that you can seize private property for the public good if it's justifiable in the public good. And there's due compensation and other things that come with it, but it's under that two-word phrase, public good. What do you think happens? The definition of public good gets stretched out so that things you wouldn't necessarily think are the public good become the public good so that private property can be seized. Now, why is this important? I said at the beginning, it's the theme of our talk, disruptions. Humanity is facing two very big ones. And the answer to help tackle them is to have more private property rights. First one, climate change. There is enough evidence out there that we take care of what is ours. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather go to the bathroom, go to the toilet in a train station, a public toilet, or would you rather go at home? Probably at home, the home field advantage, as we Americans call it. Why? Well, you spend your money, you spend your time making your bathroom nice. It's yours. You use it every single day. You might not ever see this public restroom again. You have no incentive to keep it nice. We tend to take care of what is ours. This is especially true when it comes to the environment. We are best at utilizing our resources if we own them. We call it materials use efficiency, materials use intensity. We are better at making more with less when we own it. If you look who the biggest polluters are, say in the United States, it's the US Department of Defense. It's not Amazon, it's not Dow, it's not DuPont, it's the US Department of Defense. And we conserve what we own. Second thing, income inequality. Any economist, me being one of them, will tell you that some inequality is good. We need to have kind of rewards for doing well, for meritocracy. The problem comes when the inequality is due to you not being able to enter the system, whether there are structural barriers against you entering the system, whether you need to be politically connected to enter the system. This causes social friction and tends to lead to even worse economic policies. You need to be able to create the opportunities. As we said before, property rights allow you to open a business, allow you to unleash your entrepreneurial spirit, and this is what poor and marginalized communities need. One other point, I just mentioned eminent domain in the United States. Where do you think the land, the property, is being seized to do things in the public good? It's not in Beverly Hills. If it were happening here, it's not happening in the schwanky part of Zug. No, it's happening in the inner city. It's happening with poor and marginalized communities. Lack of property rights is harming them the most. So, in conclusion, we need to have more private property rights, which calls for us to do something. Actually, to do two things, because it's a paradox. We have these communal problems, but we need to have a more private world. And a more private world is a more communal world. So the first thing we need to do is grow up. We need to stop outsourcing our rights to others. We need to take responsibility. We need to say, these are major problems facing humanity, and this is how we are going to contribute. Give us our rights back, and we will figure it out. The second way is we should listen to our inner child. We should go back and learn what we learned as children. Don't hurt people, and don't take their stuff. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get Polly home. He is my son's property right, and if I don't bring him back okay, the results will be unbearable.